So let's cultivate our motivation. And really have a big mind. Really feeling the kindness of others. And also how stuck they are within cyclic existence. And so give rise to a sense of compassion, wishing them to be free of the ails of cyclic existence, which includes the pleasures of cyclic existence as well. In other words, to be free from being under the control of afflictions and karma. But to bring that about, we have to free ourselves first. And so to fulfill our aspiration to be of great benefit to others, we aim for full enlightenment so that we'll have all the abilities and the wisdom and absolutely no hindrances from our own side to being of great benefit. So develop that intention. While she's dialing, we've noticed that the chairs are very squeaky. So since we're recording this, please try to sit still.
Only organizers can be heard. There are 0 other.
Okay, that's it. So, there were some people who were at the first teaching that aren't at the last, and some people who didn't come and are here at the end. So Venerable Tarva has said that we started this on September 4th, 2008. So, and tonight is the 72nd teaching. And that in addition to the 72 I gave, the residents have given an additional 17 reviews. And while I'm gone in July in Madison, you'll give some more reviews on this text. So I think we'll be making, Venerable Jigme, some more sets of DVDs, because we've made one set of 10 DVDs with 28 talks on this that we've been able to send to prisoners due to the kindness of a Rotary grant that enabled us to do it. So it looks like we have 2 more sets of DVDs coming up. Oh, did I turn this? Is it on? Okay. Okay, so there were a few things that people wrote in on that I just want to cover before we go on. So last week I had talked a little bit about mindfulness. And so one person who is a therapist wrote in about that. He had done his thesis on mindfulness and psychology. And so he said, as a therapist, I am very interested in the application of mindfulness in the therapeutic process. However, I became very aware of the limitations of mindfulness as an end in itself recently, when working with a client who was applying mindfulness techniques to her daily life, but continuing to view life through the Christian worldview. She was very mindful of her suffering, but still troubled as to why God was allowing bad things to happen to her. Without the ideas of karma and rebirth allied to mindfulness, the practice becomes quite limited. In general, it's very interesting to see how our worldviews and core beliefs shape our experience. If you believe that there is a God who, for some unknown reason, allows suffering to exist, it can bring on a sense of powerlessness. However, if you believe that one's present suffering is the result of one's past actions, and that it's good that this karma is ripening now, as opposed to at the time of death, and that one's future is in one's own control, then this can bring on a sense of hope, and can so that one can endure the hardships with more equanimity. So I think this is a very important idea that's being expressed here. And I brought it up in our course a few days ago, that we're not just practicing the Dharma and applying what we learn in Buddhism so that we feel better in this lifetime. All the techniques we learn can bring about feeling better in this lifetime and having better relationships, having a more peaceful mind. But if we don't change our basic worldview, we're still going to be very, very limited as to what kind of impact the teachings can have on us. Okay, so I was saying it in terms of our motivation, that if we only have a motivation to benefit from this life, that's what will come of our Buddhist practice. And, it won't bear the results of liberation or enlightenment. But if we have that motivation for liberation and enlightenment, even though we're doing the same practice, because our worldview is different, because the context in which we're situating our practice is different, and our mind is different, then it's going to bring about a very different result. So this was another example here of mindfulness of one's suffering, of one's own experience. But if with one worldview, then you remain quite stuck. It's hard to break through it. With another worldview, the same meditation technique brings very different results. Yeah, I heard, because there's sometimes some Catholic priests and some Jewish rabbis, I don't know about the Protestants, I haven't heard of that so much, but practicing Zen meditation and even becoming Zen masters. And I heard one rabbi say that he realized when he was doing Zen meditation, how much faith he had in God. And I thought, well, they may call what he's doing Zen meditation, but it's not really, because Zen meditation is done within a specific worldview. Okay? If it's Buddhist, if it's Zen that is Buddhism, then you have a particular worldview, and it's designed to bring a result within that worldview. If you do that same technique outside of that worldview, you get a completely different result, as this rabbi did. Okay? So that's why it's so important, why we spend so much time talking about motivation, why we spend so much time setting up this whole worldview of, what is the mind? How is the mind different from the body? How there's a continuity of consciousness, how karma works, all this kind of thing. Because then the meditation that's done within that context is going to have a very different view, a very different result than if you do it within a different context. Okay? So many of the Buddhist meditations, even this week we've been talking so much about love and compassion and the disadvantages of self-centeredness, the advantages of cherishing others. All those meditations can be done by people who are non-believers, who have no interest in religion. They can be done by people of other religions as well, because they're just kind of basic common sense things. But in terms of the results they're going to bring, if you don't have a worldview that includes enlightenment, then this technique is not going to lead you to enlightenment. If you don't have a worldview that knows what samsara is and what liberation is, these techniques are not going to bring that result. Okay? So that's why we spend a lot of time on the worldview. Okay, quite important. And also because when we understand the worldview, it really helps us change our mind and shape our mind and see things in a very different light. Okay. So that was one comment that I thought was very interesting that, people would want to hear. Then another one, there's some questions here. First one was, what's the difference between an Arya and an Arhat? An Arya is somebody who has realized emptiness directly. An Arhat is somebody who has eliminated all the ignorance and afflictions and the karma that causes rebirth. Okay, so somebody can be an Arya without being an Arhat. Okay, somebody cannot. If we go through the 4 points, okay, first, is there somebody who's an Arya and an Arhat? Definitely, because all Arhats are Aryas. All the Arhats have realized emptiness directly. Can you be an Arya without being an Arhat? Yes, you could either be somebody in the hearer vehicle who hasn't eliminated all the afflictive obscurations yet, or you could be somebody in the bodhisattva vehicle who hasn't done that either. Yeah. Is there somebody who is an Arhat without being an Arya? No. Is there somebody who is neither an Arhat or an Arya? Me. Okay? So that's how you go through the 4 points. Okay, now the person's next question was, if you haven't had a chance to meet with your teacher to choose an object to develop concentration on, and you want to begin to really work in concentration, should you choose an object that is already pretty familiar to you? Could it be a visualization or an image, a mantra, an aspiration? Basically, what kinds of objects are best, and do you stay on that one object per session or stay with it until you've actually gotten somewhere in your ability to focus on that one particular object easily? Okay? If it's very, very good to want to develop concentration, but a person who is asking these questions is not yet ready to do that practice in serious. Of course, we can still develop our concentration, and we should try to. But to think that we're going to develop serenity in the middle of a busy life, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay? So, of course, we want to develop our concentration, and it's very helpful to be able to do that. I think it's very good to set up a strong basis in our practice for developing concentration. And as you know, when we've talked about it, and at the Labor Day retreat, we'll talk in more depth about this, to develop single-pointed concentration and attain the jhanas, we have to eliminate, or at least repress temporarily, the various kinds of hindrances. Yeah, and so hindrances such as sensual desire, ill will, restlessness, and regret, sloth and torpor, doubt, these kinds of things. So these kinds of things, your Lam Rim analytical meditations are very, very good at helping you repress. And I'm not talking about psychological repression, which nobody wants, but it's called repression in a Buddhist sense because with concentration you haven't fully eliminated these things. They're only temporarily, been subdued, because it's only with ignorance that you cut their continuity altogether. Okay. Huh?
With wisdom.
With wisdom. Oh, did I say only with ignorance? I'm glad somebody was listening. It's only with wisdom that eliminates ignorance that we cut the continuity altogether. Okay? So it's very good, if you really want to do concentration meditation, to do some purification first. And I think that's one reason why people start out with doing prostrations, why they start out not start out, but they've already done some practice, but like with doing the Vajrasattva purification, because you have to clean out a lot of the gross stuff in your mind in order to really get down in there and work with some of these things that have to do with developing concentration. Yeah, so we have to do something with the gross kind of blech in the mind. Otherwise, we might really, do the concentration thing, try and do it as best we can, but we're going to have all sorts of garbage thoughts going on in our mind. Yeah, so we really have to spend some time seeing how the garbage thoughts are incorrect. Yeah, and beginning to become convinced that they're incorrect so that we can let them go. Because if we're not convinced then that they're incorrect, then sometimes we may repress them in an unhealthy way, or sometimes they just keep on coming at us again and again and again, and it becomes very difficult to develop concentration. Okay, so it's good to, if you want to develop concentration, do some purification practice, simplify your lifestyle. Okay, get rid of a lot of your stuff. Have less chaos around your house to look at. Stop going to movies, stop watching TV, stop surfing the internet, because all that stuff that you're looking at is putting imprints in your mind, and that's all going to come up if you do very serious concentration meditation. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't try and develop your concentration in your daily practice. Yes, try and develop it, okay? But at our level, it's if we're just developing some concentration in our daily practice, then it's probably not so crucial to have exactly the right object. Okay, we could use the breath, we could use the image of the Buddha. If you're doing a deity practice, use the image of that deity. You stick with that one thing. You don't bop around, because again, it's a thing of really familiarizing the mind with that object. Okay? But we have to learn how to work with all these distractions, because they're not going to vanish by themselves. They'll vanish if we put in a lot of effort, but not by themselves. Okay, so hopefully we will finish the text this evening. Is this exciting? Okay. So we're in the talk of the period between sessions. Okay, so when you're developing wisdom, you have your sessions where you're focusing on meditating on emptiness. And then what do you do in the break time? Because what you do in the break time between meditation sessions vastly influences your meditation sessions. Okay, that's why I said, if you really want to cultivate concentration, you got to simplify your lifestyle and get rid of stuff. Because what you do in between your concentration sessions, influences how your meditation goes. Okay, so here the advice is, in the period between sessions, be a creator of illusions. So our author, Nam Kapel, says, in general, the mere notion of illusions is accepted by everyone, Buddhists and outsiders. But there are two ways to take the analogy of illusions: that things appear like illusions, or that they really are illusions. Okay, so there's all this talk of, illusion-like meditation. So what does that really mean? Are things illusions, or are they only like illusions? Because there's a big difference between them. Yeah, quite a big difference. Okay, we'll get into that. Okay, well, maybe I should explain a little bit before we get into it. If we say things are illusions, yeah, it means that there's really not something there. Okay, like the face in the mirror, there is the reflection, but there's not a real face. Okay? If we look in a hologram, We see a face there. There's no face there. Okay, so it's like an illusion. Yeah. So an illusion is something, you know, that appears, but there's nothing there. Yeah. To say something is like an illusion means that it appears one way, but it exists another. So it's different. Okay? So when we meditate on emptiness, we are negating inherent existence. Yeah. That when we negate inherent existence, it doesn't mean that things don't exist at all. Okay? Things exist dependently, but even until we become a Buddha, even after the meditation session on emptiness, when you open your eyes and your senses are functioning again, things still appear inherently existent. Okay? The illusion-like part is that even though they appear that way to your senses, your mental consciousness doesn't believe it to be true. Okay? So in that way, the way they exist is different from the way they appear. They exist dependently, they appear to exist inherently. Okay? But that's very different than saying conventionalities are non-existent. Because if we negate their inherent existence and then say there's nothing there, they are only illusions, then we've fallen to nihilism. Yeah, we've negated too much because we've said, oh, there's nothing there, only illusions. Yeah. Whereas the Prasankika view is saying there is something there, but whatever it is not truly existent. It's dependently existent. Okay? So it's a very fine point of how to establish conventional existence and at the same time negate inherent existence. And this is a very, very fine point in the whole meditation and probably one of the most difficult parts of the meditation. Yeah, to get that balance where you can still establish conventionalities, conventional truths, and at the same time negate inherent existence. Okay, so we're not negating all existence. We're not saying things are illusions. Yeah, because if we say things are illusions, we could have real ethical problems. Yeah. If I say, oh, there's no real people out there, you know, none of you are real people. Yeah, so you don't exist. All you are is appearance to my mind. You know, you're just illusions. There's no real people out there. Then if I think like that, then, wow, I can do anything I want because I'm not hurting anybody. That's dangerous, isn't it? Okay, so, you know, other people exist. They're not just something in my mind. They're not just an illusion in my mind. But they exist as like illusions, and even I exist as like an illusion, because none of us exist truly, inherently, although we appear to exist in that way. Okay, so that's what we're getting at, and it'll come out here. Some people, not inclined towards understanding things as they are, when searching for the way in which things exist, maintain a state of mere non-conceptuality. Remember, he hit on this point before, people who just zone out in non-conceptuality. When they arise from meditation, appearances emerge indistinctly. Moreover, at such times, the substantial, solid, impenetrable appearance of mountains, buildings, houses, and so forth vanishes, and they appear translucent like smoke or the colors of a rainbow. Appearances like these are not what is meant by illusions. For things to appear as illusory in this context, there must first be a refutation of true existence by analytical awareness with respect to the object that's the basis. Okay? So this is a very important point. You only see things as illusory, as like illusions, when you have negated inherent existence. Whereas the person that the author's talking about here is somebody who hasn't negated inherent existence, but has developed single-pointed concentration and stays in a totally non-conceptual mind. When they come out of that non-conceptual mind, then everything appears kind of indistinctly and transparent, like they could walk through it. And, you know, I mean, different, if you've taken drugs, you've had these kinds of things. Yeah? So, or even even you haven't taken illegal drugs, you know, sometimes you're at a hospital and you're coming out of surgery. And, you know, you're seeing, you know, everything's like indistinct and transparent. And, you know, I mean, prescription drugs can do it too. You know, having a very high temperature, makes everything look weird too. Okay, so those things are not what is meant by illusion-like experience. Because you have, illusion-like meditation in the break time, you have to have negated true existence first. Okay, so it's not just things appearing in strange ways that they haven't appeared before. That's acid trips. Okay, so you got to discriminate acid trips from illusion-like experience in the context of meditation. They're very, very different. Okay. Okay. The way some earlier Tibetan scholars explained persons and phenomena as being like illusions was to use the common analogy. So this is a common analogy in ancient India, that you have pebbles and stones, pebbles and sticks, and a conjurer comes up and, by reciting a mantra and using eye ointment, makes the pebbles and sticks look like horses and elephants. Okay, so this is an ancient Indian thing. I've never seen it. We asked one of my teachers if he had seen it, and he hadn't either. But this is the example that comes in a lot of the texts, okay? So the pebbles and sticks, they're empty of being horses and elephants. So some teachers say, okay, since that's the analogy, so men, women, and so on appear to be persons, but they're empty of being persons. Okay. Although the mental and physical aggregates, the spheres of sensory cognition, okay, your sense bases, the cognitive faculties and so forth, all appear to be as they are empty of being such things. Similarly, these early scholars, assert that everything is like a dream, a mirage, and so on. Okay? So this is what they said. So our author says, these interpretations should be questioned. What does it mean to say that men, women, and so on are empty of being themselves? Okay, so these other people are saying, men and women appear to be persons, but they aren't persons. Mountains appear to be mountains, but they aren't mountains. Okay, so he's saying we should really question that, because that's not the right understanding. Okay? If things were not themselves, these phenomena would be totally non-existent. Okay? If a mountain isn't a mountain, it would be totally non-existent. Okay? So what these people are confusing is they're saying a mountain isn't a mountain instead of the mountain is not inherently existent. Instead of saying there's no inherently existent mountain. So you see there's a difference in these ideas. You can't say a mountain isn't a mountain. You can say it's not an inherently existent mountain. That's correct. Okay? If they were not themselves, these phenomena would be totally non-existent. If they do exist, mountains, people, things like this, they do exist. If they do exist, they must exist as themselves, since otherwise they would not exist as what they are. Yeah, then, a person, a record player would be a car, and a golf ball would be an elephant, and things like that. In such cases, these scholars have not properly gauged the extent of what is to be negated, and from relying on an insufficient image of what is to be negated, they maintain a perverted interpretation of the scriptures, which teach about illusions, dreams, and so forth, merely employing jargon associated with the common word selflessness. In other words, okay, that was all one sentence. In other words, you know, these people are talking, they're using jargon that sounds like, oh, we're talking about selflessness, we're talking about things being like illusions and whatever. But in fact, they haven't correctly identified the object of negation in the emptiness meditation. And so their negation has gone too far, so that they say things are not themselves instead of saying things are not truly existent. Okay, so that's the problem here. And there have been some in the Jonangpa school. This is also part of what happened in Tibet. Okay, they had this kind of view of things were empty of being themselves. But then, like here, you know, what does that mean? They aren't themselves? What are they then? They become non-existent. Okay, given the system of negating the object to be negated, if the extent of what is to be negated is not properly assessed, it will be impossible to validly establish the basis, in other words, to establish conventional existence. So this is a point we keep making again and again, how important it is to correctly identify the object of negation in the meditation on emptiness, because if you negate too little, then you don't realize emptiness. If you negate too much, you destroy conventionalities. You know, you destroy your mind that correctly understands conventionalities and fall to nihilism. So here's the whole thing of the two extremes of absolutism and nihilism. At such points, having become familiar with the significance of not finding any basis, any object whatsoever, such as the basis of the analyzer, the process of analysis, and so forth, the arising of blurred appearances of these things is not the meaning of an illusion. That being the case, it is completely wrong to generate a view that underestimates appearances while cognizing the lack of true existence. Okay, so it's very important. If you negate too much, yeah, then they say destroy conventional truths. You can't actually destroy conventional truths. What it means is you're having when they say you're destroying conventionalities, it means that your mind has misunderstood what conventionalities are. Okay, and so we have to be very careful about that, because it's very important to be able to validly establish the existence of conventionalities. Because otherwise, like I was saying, we have a big ethical problem. Okay? And so, again, it's hammering in that point, and it's hammering in the point that just having strange experiences in meditation is not indicative that you've had realizations. Okay? So just mountains and appearing translucent, and things seem to be radiating and glittering, and, you know, you feel like you've gone outside your body. Though, you know, those are unusual experiences. It doesn't mean that you've had realizations of bodhicitta, of the wisdom realizing emptiness, or these things. That's why study is so important, because we have to learn what these things mean and how to actually do them so that we can meditate correctly and get the correct results. Otherwise, we just hear some words, but without really understanding very well what they mean, then we start to think those words apply to our experiences. And I remember when I was, you know, kind of baby beginner, Lama would talk about the subtle mind. You know, he was always talking about the subtle mind, the subtle mind. So I remember sitting and meditating one day, and my mind got very quiet, but I could still feel like there was some kind of chatter in there that I had never noticed before. And I thought I had access the subtle mind, because there was subtle chatter that I hadn't known that, you know. that I hadn't realized I had. So I thought that was the meaning of subtle mind. I was way off, you know? Okay, so these kinds of things, you know, if we just hear a few kind of words here and there, but we haven't really studied, then we apply those words to our experiences, but, you know, we're like in Never Never Land somewhere, okay? Thank goodness I didn't go to my teacher and say that. Okay, so now the perfect way in which things appear as illusions. Okay, the King of Meditative Stabilization Sutra says, just like a mirage in the city of Gandharvas. Gandharvas are beings who, they're supposed to be like celestial musicians that have cities, but the cities, you know, appear, but you can't actually touch them, okay? So just like a mirage in the city of the Gandharvas, similar to an illusion and just like a dream, contemplating these signs of being empty of reality, understand all phenomena in the same way, okay? So what it's meaning is that, you know, a mirage appears to be real water, it isn't real water. Yeah, so that appearance is like an illusion in that it appears to exist one way, but it doesn't exist that way. So that's an analogy for when you've negated true existence in your emptiness meditation, how things still appear truly existent, but you know, to your sense consciousnesses, but your mental consciousness doesn't believe it. Okay, your mental consciousness knows that appearance is false. Okay?
You were just saying that in your meditation or in post-meditation?
In post-meditation, yeah. But in your meditation, you know that they're empty. When you arise, they appear truly existent. Okay? But you know with your mental consciousness that that appearance is false. Okay? Okay, and then there's a quote from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, which I have some doubt about the translation about it. So, okay, when the magician conjures up a horse or an elephant from a pebble or a stick, the appearance of the horse or elephant is established by direct, valid perception of the visual consciousness, while mental consciousness ascertains that it is empty of existing in the way it appears. Okay, combining these two aspects like this is how things appear like illusions. I think it's better here if I summarize, okay? What we're talking about here, because there's this thing of if things exist like illusions, how do we validly establish them? What kind of mind is a reliable cognizer if things appear truly existent even though they aren't? Okay, so in the illusion-like appearance, there's the conventional valid cognizer that knows the object. It like knows the clock. Okay, so that conventional reliable cognizer can know this as a clock, even though the appearance of a clock is mistaken to that mind, and the appearance is mistaken because the clock appears truly existent even though it isn't. Okay, you with me? So a reliable cognizer, sometimes translated as valid cognition, okay, this is, in the case of sentient beings, every cognition except meditative equipoise on emptiness is mistaken, because all of our cognitions have the appearance of true existence unless we are still a sentient being who's an Arya in meditative equipoise. At that point, there's no appearance of true existence. But all of our other minds, all day long, there's the appearance of true existence. Okay? So that mind is mistaken, okay, in that it appears one way, but it doesn't exist that way. But that mind can still be valid if it can correctly identify what an object is on the conventional level. Okay, so even though this my mind is perceiving this clock as truly existent. There's the appearance of true existence to my mind. Okay, I can still say this is a clock. Yeah, so that's not an erroneous cognizer. It's a clock. Okay, why is it a clock? There's 3 conditions for it to be a clock. It appears to a conventional knower. It's not invalidated by another conventional knower. Okay, which means that pretty much, well, let me do the third one. And the third one is that it's not invalidated by a cognizer knowing the ultimate. Okay, so what this means is if I looked at this and let's say it was really dim, okay, and so I didn't see it very well, I could think that it was a, what?
An egg timer.
An egg, do egg timers look like this? Okay, so I could think it was an egg timer, okay? Or I could think it's a calculator. Yeah, okay. So I just see this. So I could look at this, you know, it's like this. I could look at a calculator, okay? So that's appearing to a knower, a conventional knower, my mind. Now the thing is that invalidated by another conventional knower, a reliable conventional knower, either my own at a later time or somebody else's? Okay. Now if I come back the next day and it's bright and I look and it's like, oh, this isn't a calculator, it's a clock. Then it's my own mind that's a reliable conventional cognizer that knows it's a clock. Or, you know, somebody else could have looked at it earlier and even though the light is dim, come in and say, no, children, it's not a calculator, it's a clock. Okay? So the point is that just because I label something doesn't mean that it functions as that. Okay? I could perceive this as a calculator and label it as a calculator. That doesn't mean it's going to function like a calculator. Okay, so, you know, it has to have a certain amount of reliableness, that, you know, it has to have a reliable cognizer apprehending it, even though that reliable cognizer is mistaken because the thing appears truly existent. So it's that when you're doing the illusion-like, you know, appearance, what's called the meditation on illusion-like appearance, because it's done in your post-meditation time. There's, on one hand, a valid conventional cognizer identifying an object, and on the other hand, there's a knowledge that that appearance is false. And that knowledge that the appearance is false is because you've been meditating on emptiness, and even though you're not still directly apprehending emptiness, that sure made a big impact on your mind, so that when you're out of the exact experience, it's still hanging on there, you know, and you know that what you're perceiving isn't true. Okay? So you need those 2 things for it to be illusory-like appearance. You know, a valid a reliable cognizer of the object, plus an understanding that it doesn't exist truly. Okay, so you have to have those 2 things for it to be illusory experience, illusion-like meditation. Yeah? So again, it's really pointing out, it's not just that things appear strange to you, okay? You have to have those 2 things. Mm-hmm.
You said that only beings in meditative equipoise on emptiness perceive things in an unmistaken way, or not mistakenly. But what about like beings in the peak of samsara?
Okay, beings in the peak of samsara, they have very, very strong concentration, but they still have dualistic appearances. They haven't realized emptiness. So as long as you know, the only time you have unmistaken appearances is in meditative equipoise on emptiness. And beings at the peak of samsara, most, you know, by and large haven't done that.
About meditation on nothingness.
Same thing. Same thing. Unless you've got to realize emptiness. Yeah?
So what would be mistaken in that case if you're not having...
Because you can still, you have truly existent nothingness. Yeah, and there's still a sense of a truly existent I in there, you know, on a subtle level. Okay, so again, you remember we covered this before, that it's not just suppressing the appearance of true existence. It's disproving true existence. Okay? Okay. Okay, so it says, moreover, once we have carried out the space-like equipoise on emptiness, that's the meditation on emptiness with direct perception, and gone to the very heart of the practice, when we arise from it and the appearance of objects is illusory, there is no need to seek further techniques. Okay, so actually, them appearing as illusory comes naturally after you've realized emptiness. You don't have to force yourself to see them as illusory. Okay, but you try to be very, very mindful that they are. Okay. When initially meditating on emptiness, through mixing the basis of negation, which is, for example, the person, and that which is to be negated, the person's inherent existence. Because they mix together, as one, they can't be differentiated. Because in our normal appearance, the way things appear to us, there's the dependently existent object, and there's the appearance of true existence, and they're completely mixed in our ordinary appearance. We can't tell, when we see something, what is the dependent object and what is the truly existent thing. They appear totally mixed to us, okay? But as explained above, through faultlessly cognizing the meaning of emptiness and gaining familiarity with it over a long period of time, by not relinquishing the factors and conditions of meditation, your intellect will reach the limit of perfection. Okay? So you have to keep on this over a long period of time, okay, and really gaining familiarity with the correct view of emptiness, and then applying that afterwards, okay? So, we all want something really quick, and the path is not like that. The path takes time. Yeah, and there's no... the only way to hurry up and gain realizations is to do a lot of intense practice, so that in your next life you have a lot of seeds already planted in your mind. But for those of us who don't have a lot of seeds planted in our mind, then there's no way to speed it up. We've got to go through all the steps of the practice. Now, what speeds up or slows down the practice is whether we practice or not. Okay? Yeah. So, we want to speed up the practice, speed up the process without doing the practice. Okay? We want the fast techniques so that it all hurries up, so that we don't have to practice so much. Does that motivation sound a little fishy? When they say Tantra is a quick vehicle, the reason it's quick is because your motivation of compassion and bodhicitta is so strong that you can't bear to think of sentient beings suffering in samsara longer than they have to, and you want to really hurry up to attain enlightenment for their benefit. Okay. Whereas we want to hurry up just because we're lazy and we don't want to do the practice so much. Okay. Okay. The great Bodhisattva Chekawa's advice on training in the precious awakening mind The excellent whispered lineage of the great vehicle mind training, known as the rays of the sun, has been explained according to the whispered instructions of the Venerable Master, who has mastery over the ocean-like teachings of the ones thus gone, the sublime navigator, the great king of the doctrine, Tsongkhapa. The final view concerning the subtlest essence of these subjects should be discerned from this venerated teacher's great exposition of the stages of the path to enlightenment. Okay, so he's saying that he's following Tsongkhapa's view, or the view as explained according to Tsongkhapa, the view of the Buddha, and recommends us to follow, the great treatise on the stages of the path. And then there's something that he wrote in verses here, so I will read that as well. This process of acquainting yourself with the awakening mind is the uncommon cause for actualizing a Buddha's wisdom. It is the only entrance for venturing into the great vehicle, the Mahayana. It is like a fire burning off the thicket of faulty actions, and is a treasure of jewels providing all prosperity. The Supreme Being, the powerful subduer, who speaks about the vast and profound doctrine, the chief of his spiritual children, invincible Maitreya, and refined, glorious, and eloquent Manjushri. Nagarjuna and Asanga, who opened up the tradition for the carriers of the teachings to pass through. Shantideva and glorious Atisha, who have generated the altruistic mind and transmitted it from ear to ear. When they talk about whispered lineage or ear to ear, it means that the teacher gave it in oral teachings to a disciple. It wasn't something that was initially written down, so it was only given to a few specific disciples who were ready to hear it. Okay? And transmitted it from ear to ear, showered their teachings on the Bodhisattva Chekawa, who created these techniques for engendering the precious awakening mind. The way to generate it in your continuum is through the 4 preliminary practices and the process of training in the twofold awakening mind, which is the actual basis. Twofold awakening mind, ultimate and conventional bodhicitta. You should clearly distinguish between the common and uncommon systems of each of the great pioneers of the teachings, especially the supreme tradition of Shantideva, of training in the awakening mind through the exchange of self with others, and that of Chekawa, a conqueror's spiritual child, so that in integrating these 2 trainings of the mind, the 2 trainings, the 7-point instruction, and then the equalizing, exchanging self and others, by integrating these 2 trainings of the mind into the total body of the path, you will have the technique for practicing the subtlest attributes of the teaching. I have clearly expressed everything in such a way. Whatever has been elucidated in accordance with the unsurpassable doctrine in these words of advice is due to the kindness of my teachers. It is difficult to fathom the intention of the conquerors and their spiritual children, and I am one of inferior intellect and small exertion. So if in collecting these explanations together I have failed to explain them correctly, I declare such faults from my heart before those who have the eye of the doctrine. By the force of whatever accumulation, now that was his kind of humility and apology, and now he goes into dedication. By the force of whatever accumulation of wholesome virtue I have amassed from this endeavor, may I and every living being throughout all space never be parted from the awakening mind. May the force of that dispel every trace of misery and bestow happiness and benefit on wandering beings throughout the 3 realms. Through their body, speech, and mind, seeing, hearing, recollecting, and making contact with the doctrine, for as long as cyclic existence remains. Okay, and then the Tibetan publishers, colophon. This explanation of the superb whispered transmission of the great vehicle mind training, entitled Rays of the Sun, has been composed by Nam Kapel, who face persistent requests from people with great faith in these teachings. Having cultivated his thoughts and actions for 12 years in accordance with the most wonderful king of the doctrine, Tsongkhapa, he is a repository of many discourses on sutra and mantra, and dwells in the blessings of many realized beings. He composed it while residing in solitude at Rinchen Monastery. And then there's always, we always start at the beginning and read a little bit to start again, to make it so that we pause midway, so we have to finish it later on. Okay, so this is the author's homage and request. At all times I take refuge in and prostrate at the feet of the sublime and infinitely compassionate spiritual masters. Out of their immense love, may they care for me in every moment of my life. That's a good way to end. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions.
Last part that you read, was so beautiful, when he talked about the two kinds of ways of developing bodhicitta. I wasn't clear on what the meaning was. Was he saying that you should combine them, like Geshe-Tetrao did?
Yeah.
So when he said the part right before that of one is common and uncommon, and keep them...
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Okay. Let's go back to what he was saying.
Combine them, like,
Yeah.
Geshe-Tetrao.
Yeah. Okay. He was saying you should clearly distinguish between the common and uncommon systems of each of the great pioneers of the teachings. So I think that might be, wait a minute. Actual basis. Because when he's talking about the great pioneers of the teachings, that's usually Nagarjuna and Sangha, and so, Nagarjuna taught the Madhyamaka, Sangha taught the Chittamadra. Okay, so you have that. But often, usually when they talk about the two great pioneers, it's, in the field of merit, the Tanka there, okay? So on Tsongkhapa's right, you have Maitreya and followed by a Sangha, and that's called the vast lineage because that's emphasizing the teachings on bodhicitta. And then on the Buddha's left is the profound lineage with Manjushri and then Nagarjuna. So it's usually kind of divided like that between, the teachings on bodhicitta and the teachings on emptiness when they talk about the two pioneers. So I must say it isn't totally clear to me here, okay? And the reason why is because the English punctuation, there's no punctuation. So it's not telling you where the sentence exactly ends, okay? Because it says, because usually the systems of the great pioneers of the teachings, okay, especially that supreme tradition of Shantideva, of training in the awakening mind through the exchange of self and others, and that of Chekawa, a conqueror's spiritual child. Okay, so that in integrating these two trainings of the mind, maybe they're talking about trainings of the mind, meaning ultimate bodhicitta and conventional bodhicitta. Because Chekawa was doing equalizing, exchanging self and others, just like Shantideva was. So that might be the meaning. These two trainings could mean not the two ways of generating bodhicitta, but it could mean the two bodhicittas. Okay? By integrating the two trainings of the mind into the total body of the path, you will have the technique for practicing the subtlest attributes of the teachings. So it must be that. Yeah, it must be the ultimate and conventional bodhicitta. Yeah.
It may negate the question, but I did have this question. You have always taught us, I thought, those two ways of developing bodhicitta together. and Geshe Tekchuk says that. But when we get teachings generally, they're kept quite separate. So is it just is it from the mind training school that they would be combined?
Oh, they're taught separately. The lineage for them is separate, and Tsongkhapa put them together into an 11-point meditation. Okay, yeah, it was Tsongkhapa who did the 11 points, but they're usually, like two distinct systems and ways of doing it. Yeah, because the equalizing and exchanging self and others brings in emptiness much more than the 7-point instruction. Yeah.
Just to clarify, conventional bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta are the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, conventional relative, that's the same thing. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. So also for all my mistakes, I apologize in this. Yeah. And, maybe we hear this teaching again and again. And I would also like to have a better translation of the end section, the section on emptiness. I think that would be very helpful at some point. When I get back from Wisconsin, we'll start the text on the 4 establishments of mindfulness as taught by Chukyi Gyaltsen, I think Chukyi Gyaltsen, in his commentary on Ornament for Clear Realizations. So I have a translation of his text. So I think it might be good if the people on the internet and the telephone and all maybe emailed the office, and then we emailed them the text. Okay? So if you want a copy of the text beforehand, email us. It's office.sravasti@gmail.com.